The mountains had always been cruel to a man who chose to live among them, but Jacob Rourke had long ago accepted their silence, their bitter winds, and the way loneliness sank into a man's bones until he almost forgot how to speak. He was a mountain man in every sense, broad-shouldered, rough-bearded, with hands calloused from trapping, hunting, and building his own shelter against the teeth of winter. His cabin stood miles from the nearest mining town, tucked beneath the pines where the snow lingered even in spring, and the only voices he heard belonged to wolves on the ridges or eagles circling high above. He had no kin, no woman, and no reason to expect the world to bring him anything except the next storm to endure. That morning, however, when the light slid across the valley and the crows began circling, Jacob felt a stirring unease. The birds were not wheeling over a kill or the carcass of a deer, they were screaming above his own roof, and when he trudged outside, squinting against the glare of fresh snow, his breath froze not just from the cold but from the sight that met him. A young blonde woman hanging by the wrists from the ridge beam of his cabin roof, her skin raw where rope had dug into it, her dress torn to shreds, and across her bare shoulder the words, "Apache lover," burned deep into her flesh as though branded by a hot iron. For a long moment Jacob could not even move, for in all his years of solitude nothing had prepared him for this. An angel and a victim both, swaying gently in the cruel morning wind, her head lolling, her lips blue with cold. At last instinct broke through shock, and he cut her down with his hunting knife, catching her limp body against his chest. She was alive, though barely, her breath shallow, her pulse fluttering like a frightened bird, and Jacob carried her inside with a gentleness that belied the size of his hands. He laid her near the fire, wrapped her in a buffalo hide, and boiled water for tea, all the while his mind storming with questions. Who was she? Who had left her to die in such a manner? And what kind of cruelty would sear those words into her flesh? Days passed before she truly woke, drifting in and out of fevered dreams while Jacob nursed her as best he could, wiping the sweat from her brow, spooning broth between her cracked lips, listening to the broken phrases she muttered in her sleep. Names he did not know, pleas for mercy, the word, please, whispered over and over. When finally her eyes opened with clarity, they were a shade of blue he had never seen in the wilderness, brighter than glacier water, and they locked onto him with both fear and desperate trust. She tried to sit but winced, her burned skin pulling, and Jacob urged her gently to rest. Her name, she told him in a voice rasped by thirst, was Eliza Hartwell, daughter of a settler family who had come west chasing promises of golden land. Her father had been a hard man, her mother timid, and when their wagon broke near the reservation lands, it was not the white prospectors who offered help but an Apache youth who had given them water, guided them toward shelter, and later, when the family lingered too long in the territory, kept them alive with meat and corn. Eliza, barely 19, had grown close to that youth, whose name was Neshoba, and though their bond was innocent, a friendship forged in shared songs and secret laughter, it was enough for tongues to wag when miners and settlers caught wind of it. Her father, furious at the disgrace, had denounced her, but it was a gang of rough men from the mining camp who seized her, calling her a traitor, branding her as Apache lover, with a hot poker, and leaving her strung up on Jacob's roof as a warning to others who might cross the bitter lines between races. As she spoke, her voice trembled with shame, but Jacob felt only a deep rage burning in his chest, for he had seen the brutality of men in the mining camps and had long ago chosen the solitude of the mountains to escape their cruelty. He told her in his quiet, steady way that no one deserved such torment, and that here, in his cabin, she was safe. The days that followed bound them in a fragile but growing trust. Jacob hunted elk to feed her, fetched herbs to ease the pain of her burns, and taught her to mend her wounds with mountain remedies. Eliza, though weakened, began to help in small ways, stirring the pot of beans, sweeping the cabin floor, smiling shyly at him when he returned with firewood stacked high on his shoulders. Loneliness had been Jacob's only companion for so long that the sound of another's laughter, even weak and hesitant, felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He found himself watching her hair glow gold in the firelight, listening to the way her voice softened when she spoke his name, and though he tried to bury the stirrings of his heart, they grew roots deeper each day. But peace in the mountains never lasted. One afternoon, tracks in the snow told Jacob men had come near, boot prints, not moccasins, circling like wolves around his valley. He knew the mining gang would not leave their cruelty unfinished. They wanted to silence Eliza, to erase the shame she might bring them if her story reached the law, and perhaps to punish the solitary mountain man who had dared to shield her. That night Jacob sharpened his rifle sights, set snares along the trail, and told Eliza the truth: they would have to stand together or perish. She trembled, not from fear of him but from the memory of those men, and in her eyes Jacob saw the courage of someone who had already endured worse than death. When the gang came at dawn, shouting and firing their pistols into the air, Jacob met them with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. The mountains became his ally, echoing his rifle shots, sending avalanches of rock when he lured the men along narrow passes. Eliza, though wounded, steadied a pistol in her hands and fired from the cabin window, her shot true enough to scatter those who thought her broken. In the chaos 2 men fell, others fled, and the leader, a scar-faced brute named Callahan, stumbled bleeding into the snow. Jacob stood over him, gun aimed, while Eliza watched from the doorway, and though vengeance burned hot, Jacob lowered the barrel. "You'll leave this mountain," he said in a voice carved from stone, "and if you ever set foot near her again, I'll finish what I spared." Callahan, broken and beaten, crawled away into the trees, his threat forever dimmed by the memory of Jacob's fury. Silence returned, but it was a different silence than before, not empty, not hollow, but filled with the bond between 2 souls who had found each other in the cruelest of fates. Through winter's bite and spring's thaw they healed, together, Eliza's scars fading though never vanishing, Jacob's heart opening though scarred itself by years of solitude. By the time summer warmed the high meadows, she no longer looked like a victim but a woman who had chosen her place beside a man the world had forgotten. And Jacob, once resigned to die alone beneath the pines, found himself with laughter in his cabin, soft hands beside his rough ones, and the knowledge that even in the loneliest mountains, love could be carved out of pain and cruelty like fire coaxed from frozen wood. Their story was never written in books, never told in towns where men boasted of gold and conquest, but in the hush of the valley, where wildflowers bent in the wind and eagles wheeled above, the mountain man and the branded woman forged a life that defied the cruelty of the world and proved that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in solitude, but in the hand that dares to reach for another even after it has been burned.